Hey, I'm Selc. I'm an entrepreneur based out of San Francisco, and I help with investments, and I mentor companies out of 500 startups. I've been living out of Silicon Valley for the past 5, 6 years and founded a couple of companies. And I actually grew up here in Istanbul. I want to kind of share some stories about like how I ended up in San Francisco and take you through this presentation that is either going to be the most interesting or the weirdest presentation that you'll see all week. Introductions, right? So I grew up here in Istanbul. I studied computer science at Koç University, after which I went to the United States to do a master's in computer science with a Fulbright scholarship in the United States. Fulbright is awesome. The United States government pays you a lot of money to study there, and it's a pretty prestigious scholarship. But afterwards, you actually can't stay in the United States. You have to go back to your home country and spread the American ways among your folks. It wasn't as dramatic as this, but I actually had to go back to Turkey and figure out what I wanted to do because I couldn't stay in the US. So I did, and I co-founded my first company with a couple of my friends from back in college called İletken, and I was super excited to get the startup off the ground. I heard about all these startups. I'd known people doing startups in New York, and I was like, yes, we're going to do this. And the startup that we created was doing this thing called personalization. Do you guys know what personalization technology is? Like, familiar? Like when you go to Amazon, like they try to look at what you're buying and like what you're clicking so they can recommend you things that you might want to buy. This kind of thing is kind of difficult for the average online retailer to do, and we would build a SaaS service to provide to these retailers so they could personalize their websites. We were really excited, and we realized that building startup wasn't all that easy. So a few of the problems that we had was back in 2010, it was quite difficult to raise money for a B2B SaaS tool in Turkey. The market that we were attacking in Turkey was quite small. The e-commerce market was just emerging in 2010. And we weren't really focused as a company. We were really focused on the technology side of things than focusing on a product and a market. And what I've kind of come to realize is as a startup, what you really need to do is start with the customer rather than start with the technology. So some hard lessons learned, and figured I was not going to really make this thing work in Turkey. So I decided to hop on a plane and go to San Francisco as a tourist. Remember, I couldn't really work in the United States. I actually eventually got an O1 visa and got to stay, but kind of worked around the immigration policies somehow. And like I started this company called SocialWire, and what SocialWire did was, remember I was working on recommendation engines. I felt like the best way to build a recommendation engine would be using Facebook's data, right? So Facebook knows actually, in some ways, more than Amazon about your behavior, right? They know what you like, they know who your friends are, where you live, and everything. And if you could use that data, you could really personalize someone's experience, show them the right products. And that was a pretty novel concept back in 2011. So I was really excited to go to Silicon Valley, and I didn't really know anyone, and I kind of slummed it a little bit, right? So I didn't really know anyone, investors weren't really chasing me, and I was sad. I was staying at a hostel. And then I realized I actually had to hustle to kind of make this whole thing work. A lot of people say you shouldn't do cold introductions to investors. You shouldn't really do that. But I think one of the key skill sets of an entrepreneur is to be creepy and kind of chase people and stuff. And I was pretty good at that without being weird. For example, I was at a conference just like this, and I really wanted to connect with this venture capitalist called Bing Gordon, from this venture capital firm called Kleiner Perkins. Do you guys know Kleiner Perkins, the venture capital firm? So they launched this fund called Social Fund at the time, and I really wanted to get to him. And I go to this conference, speaking at it, and I asked the organizers, can I meet him? They're like, yeah, everybody wants to meet Bing. We can't introduce you. I'm like, okay. So in the conference, just like this, there's like 2 exits. So like I was like, hey, if I wait in front of his exits, like one of them, I have a 50% shot in meeting him, and I'll be after all those guys that attack him when he gets off stage, right? So I did, and I was lucky enough. I ran into him, and I was like, here's my elevator pitch. And he was like, young man, this is interesting, but I'm going on vacation on Friday. And I was like, I'm going to drive you to the airport if necessary, so you should totally listen to my pitch. And I think you got to be creepy, but you have to make an impression. So 2 days later, I was having breakfast with him at Menlo Park. So And he became a friend and opened a lot of doors. So I think this kind of hustling is really important, plus building out a network in Silicon Valley. But I was, again, really excited in meeting these venture capital firms like Sequoia and Kleiner and others, and I was kind of starstruck as the young Turkish boy in Silicon Valley. And what I've realized is the job of a venture capital firm is to have meetings. And the job of an entrepreneur is to actually execute and build a business. And I was really focused on trying to raise a Series A that I kind of lost sight of the fact that we were a seed stage company. And spent a bunch of time meeting all the top VCs, made friends with them, but didn't end up raising money. And then switched my strategy to raise from angel investors, and that really worked. So I ended up raising $2 million from some of the top angel investors like Ariel Polar, Brian Sugar, and venture capital firms like First Round Capital, who are investors in Uber and other folks. So we had the money in the bank. I was so excited, like I wanted to kind of rent a hotel room, put all the money on the bed and like throw it in the air and stuff like that, which I didn't do. Or did I? But what happens is what I've also learned is like constraints as you execute on a company makes you creative and makes you kind of get shit done. And I think we had too much money, and we didn't test and do experiments enough. So one of the problems that we had was we realized that the customers that we were selling to, like these really big retailers like Zappos and Walmart, did not want to change their site and put this Facebook personalization things over there, because like they had tested and optimized this site over the past 10 years, and we just couldn't sell this widgets to them, even though we thought it would make their experience better. So we spent a bunch of money and time building a product that was really hard to sell. And then we did this thing that a lot of startups do, pivot. We realized, what do we really have here? We have really good technology that can match products on a retailer's site to people's Facebook profiles and Facebook data. What can you do if you can match products to Facebook? You do advertising, right? So we're like, screw the recommendations, let's become an advertising company, and that really worked. And then we were like dancing and stuff again. And then we ended up kind of signing customers like Zappos, QVC, Neiman Marcus, Target, and we're the leading product advertising company in the US, working with channels like Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, and others. We've hired a professional CEO to run the company who's done an amazing job. He was running BD at American Online. And the company's doing really well, but I kind of got bored and itchy. And I started another company after that called Boostable. And Boostable came out from a problem that I've seen selling to our customers at SocialWire. The problem was we were having an easy time selling to retailers like Zappos and others, but such a hard time selling to online marketplaces like these ones, like eBay, Ticketmaster, and Etsy. The problem that these guys have is when you buy a product on eBay for $100, eBay makes $10 and the seller makes $90. Right? It's really difficult for eBay to spend millions of dollars of advertising on this $10 money they're making, right? They have to run their operations and then run advertising campaigns that are profitable. They have the technology, they have the data, but they don't have the money. So what if we can use their technology and data, but take the money from the sellers, right? That would be a win-win situation, because the eBay sellers would have like a super easy advertising tool to grow their sales, and they would pay the money for their Facebook ads, and eBay would have free advertising traffic. So I thought it was a good winning concept, so just started building it out. And recruited my former competitor, Alex, as my co-founder, who's started and sold a company that was a competitor to my previous company, so you can be friends with your enemies sometimes. Second time around, raising money was easier, because like once you know like a known entity in Silicon Valley and you can call up investors, kind of the fundraising thing becomes easier. And then we got accepted into Y Combinator as well, which is one of the top accelerator programs, just like 500 startups. And that really helped. It's not programs like 500 startups or Y Combinator. It's not only the advice that you get, and you get plugged into this network. They're all awesome things. But they have this thing called Demo Day. How many of you guys are familiar with like Demo Day or accelerators? One of the best things that you get out of a Demo Day is to create a competitive dynamic while you're fundraising, right? Because when you want to fundraise, what you want to do is want to talk to as many good investors as possible and hopefully bring them to a situation where they're competing against each other for your deal. The dynamic of a Demo Day situation is I pitch my startup on a stage like this, but unlike here, there's like hundreds of investors that can give me money, right? So basically it creates a competitive dynamic if what I'm doing is good. And We played this pretty well at Boostable, and we raised $3.2 million after Y Combinator, and which was like one of the top companies coming out of YC. And everything was good and everything. We signed like a lot of top marketplaces like eBay, OpenSky, BigCommerce, Eventbrite, and we were basically supplying advertising dollars for them. But also, one thing I've also realized is that like you can run a company, but you can't really run a company. You need to kind of take your team to where you are. The problem that we've had was we had some differences in where we wanted to take the company. We were my co-founder and sales team and myself. I wanted to really build a large company where we were targeting the sellers of the marketplace as our customers and kind of like follow like a PayPal like strategy where we'd accumulate like a network of sellers. And my co-founder and my sales team wanted to kind of go after like an early opportunity where we would white label our software to online marketplaces like eBay. And figured we're gonna kind of have the situation, so it's best to kind of let the company execute in one direction. So I stepped down and let my co-founder run the company, and we've been doing really well. So now I'm part of 500 startups as an entrepreneur in residence, and the role is I help mentor our accelerator companies and help make investment decisions on who's going to be on the San Francisco Accelerator program. And I'm working on a couple of things which I'll tell you about. But one question that I get all the time here is I came from Turkey, and I was like the young Turkish boy that came out of Silicon Valley. How do you start up in Silicon Valley, right? Because I think there's two opportunities. Right? In Turkey, you can easily build a successful company that's targeting the Turkish market or surrounding markets. And another thing you can do is you can go after a global opportunity. It's quite easy, right? So moving to Silicon Valley, I usually say you should get a direct flight to San Francisco and go make it happen, because it's not really a recipe. What you got to do is, I think to make it in Silicon Valley, you need to build a global product that is at least 4 times better than what there's out there, right? Because there's opportunities to build great companies by kind of applying what's working in the US or global markets into opportunities in your local market. But to make it in Silicon Valley, I think you need to be at least 4 times better or different than the solutions out there. And I think for us to create more global companies, we need, especially in Turkey, a change of mindset in entrepreneurship and investments. And I think a few people talked about this in the panel earlier, but one thing that I've seen, having kind of grown up here in Turkey, started a company here, and kind of seen some other regions, there are 2 types of ecosystems. There's a type of ecosystem like Israel or Sweden that basically builds great global companies like Spotify or Waze. And I think the reason is because they have to, right? If you want to be the Uber of Estonia, I'd rather open a chain of restaurants, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to kind of copy something and kind of appropriate something from TechCrunch. On the other hand, there are ecosystems like India or China where you should go for it because it's a huge market. You should basically do Uber in China. It makes so much sense. But when you're talking about a country like Turkey, we're basically kind of in between. We're blessed and we're cursed at the same time, because we can build great, successful companies in our local market. It's not as small, and I think a lot of our entrepreneurs and investors are conditioned to kind of go in that direction. Well, I think we should have both. So if you want to create something unique, you should just like hop on a plane and go to Silicon Valley, and I think we have a self-selection. So if you're good enough, you will make it over there. So what's next on my end? One thing we're working on right now is kind of a venture capital entity that solves 2 major problems for Silicon Valley and local startup ecosystems like Turkey. You may not know, but you are at an extreme advantage in Turkey compared to startups in Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, we have tons of cash. There's money everywhere. And we're in the epicenter of all the new opportunity. We know what's going to happen in the market. A lot of the early ideas come out of Silicon Valley, and we have great entrepreneurs that have a lot of experience. The problem, though, is that we do not have engineers. Right? All the engineers go to Uber, Airbnb, Google, and they're paid like $180,000 a year. You have to buy them a keg and a pool table and all that stuff, and if someone offers them $5,000 more, they go elsewhere. It's a really difficult situation. So San Francisco has become the best place to scale a startup and build very large companies, but it's become the worst place to start a company. On the other end, what we see in ecosystems like Turkey, Serbia, Ukraine, and other places in this region is that there are really talented engineers. But because of the reasons that I talked about earlier, they're really focused on building to local opportunities, and they do not have the product marketing, design, and sales experience that their Silicon Valley counterparts have. And that's not difficult to acquire. If you basically built a company in Silicon Valley and learned about it, you could really do it. So what if we built an entity where we match Silicon Valley ideas with Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, Silicon Valley growth people with engineering talent in countries like Turkey, where this is not outsourcing, this is actually, we're co-founding these companies with these engineers. We would test many ideas, we would find the stuff that works, and we would launch these companies in the United States. So that's what we're trying to do. It's kind of like a rocket internet, but with original ideas, and we're more founder-friendly. So that's kind of what we're working on. Our hope is that these engineers learn how to do startups, and they would come back to Turkey, build great startups, or actually launch their startups in Silicon Valley. So as I'm wrapping up, I'm going to talk about a little experiments that we did under this. The first startup that we're basically building under this thing called Z1 is this company called Homebox. And remember, like I was telling you about, like I spent like $1 million and like a bunch of time building a product that we realized didn't really work. We did the exact opposite here. What we did was we had this idea. I've been living outside of Turkey over the past 8 years, and like what happens? You miss your home country, right? I miss Turkey, right? And there are 42 million other people in the United States that are just like me. They're from other countries, but they really miss their home. And I knew if I got like this Turkish chocolate bar or like a Choco Prince somewhere in a supermarket in the United States, I would be paying 4 times the price, because I'm not really buying that chocolate bar, I'm buying that emotion. So we didn't raise $1 million or hire a bunch of engineers and stuff like that to validate this product is really needed. What we did was we built a landing page in half a day. Like, do you miss Turkey? Like, we'll bring you all the stuff that you want every month to your doorstep. And we ran some Facebook ads, target Turkish people living in the United States. And then we started capturing emails. What we saw was on average on Facebook, you see like a 1-2% click-through rate, where like 1 out of 100 people that see ads on Facebook click them. What we saw was 12%. So 12 out of 100 people that saw our ads were clicking, and 1 out of 3 people that were going to our site were signing up with their email. We're like, whoa, okay. Our thesis kind of works, right? So these people really want this thing, and we started getting payments, and then like, shit, we have their money, now we actually have to ship them something. We went to the market and bought a bunch of Turkish stuff, and then shipped that, and got tweets like, this is the best thing that happened to Turkish people in the United States. So I'm like, look, okay, we have something, we should invest more. We're still not sure if this thing's gonna work, but we have a lot of evidence, right? So this is the way that a lot of entrepreneurs build things in Silicon Valley, and I think this should be more of how we're building things as well. Also, what you just saw was another experiment, right? Another product that we're building is like a presentation tool like PowerPoint for storytelling, where you see these really weird animated GIFs and stuff like that, and I was trying to test this on you to see if it can stand like a weird presentation tool, and this was like also part of another experiment. So as we're wrapping up, I can take any questions if you have. If you want to reach out to me, my email is selc@fireandstartups.com. So happy to take any questions if you have any.
Yeah, one question. Right. So how many more of these are you planning to launch?
Our goal early on is to basically launch 1 or 2 startups a year.
Okay.
But like to do that, look at it as like a marketing funnel. Yep. Right? You advertise to a lot of people. Some people come to your site, some people buy, right? So our goal is to have a mechanism to do a lot of experiments, find experiments that are promising, and then invest into these experiments. And we think we're going to end up with a couple of companies that are really successful.
Because there are some people who are trying to do 12 startups in 12 months with really, really fast, but they're usually alone, like Levels.io and another guy here. What do you think of those?
I think focus is really important to get a startup done. And like what we're really trying to do is we're not executing all these things by ourselves. What we're trying to be like a really rich co-founder that brings you like money and engineering talents and stuff like that. And we actually work with general managers or co-founders that are going to be running these things. It's kind of like very similar to like Rocket Internet or like the newly announced Google Alphabet, where we basically kind of like a overseeing arch with a lot of resources where we bring teams together, and we want the teams to focus and execute on these opportunities.
Perfect. please join me in giving a warm hand of applause for Selçuk. And you can sign up to hipslides.com if you really want to do cool presentations. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Yep.